The story tells about a hero party called the Triumphant Hero Party. After about 10 years of relentless fighting, everyone finally returned to their homeland. That place was the royal capital. At this moment, Haida, a member of the Triumphant Hero Party, spoke up. He thought they would receive a very warm welcome, because the Triumphant Hero Party had successfully defeated the Demon King. That was a very important milestone in their lives. And indeed, it was exactly like that. The Triumphant Hero Party was warmly welcomed by the people after returning, making the streets more crowded than ever. The Triumphant Hero Party had a total of 4 members. They were Hinmeru, Aizen, Haida, and the final main character, Frieren. They were praised by the king. The king even ordered statues of the Triumphant Hero Party to be built in the plaza. This made Hinmeru extremely excited. He wondered how his handsome appearance would be portrayed. Meanwhile, Haida was an alcoholic, so he drank as much as he wanted after this journey. When the streets gradually became empty, the members of the Triumphant Hero Party gathered together. They reminisced about their memories from the very beginning. Right before the party set out on their journey, Haida and Aizen had almost been executed by the king, because they dared to disrespect him. If it weren't for Frieren stopping it, they would have truly been finished. As for Haida, being an alcoholic, he often got drunk during missions. This happened almost every week, leaving Frieren and the others quite helpless. Of course, Frieren also had her own problems. In short, they were all unforgettable memories. And at this moment, the Triumphant Hero Party truly cherished those memories. Hinmeru felt very grateful, because he had the chance to travel with his companions. Even though the journey lasted for 10 years, Frieren still thought it was very short. This surprised the other 3, since 10 years was not a small number. Even so, Frieren still felt it was complete. At that moment, a meteor shower passed by, so the members of the Triumphant Hero Party began to watch it together. For Hinmeru, this was truly a moment marking peace. Everyone enjoyed it to the fullest. The next morning, after going through a long and difficult journey, Frieren began setting out on a new journey. There, she could collect magic, and that place was located at the center of the continent. Of course, Frieren experienced many new things. Unexpectedly, her new journey lasted nearly 50 years. Since Frieren had something she needed for practicing magic, she decided to return to the royal capital to retrieve it, because she remembered that item was still with Hinmeru. Compared to before, the royal capital had changed a lot. At this time, Frieren met her old companion Hinmeru again. His appearance had aged significantly. Even Hinmeru himself was surprised by this. As for Hinmeru, he thought they would never meet again. Fortunately, everything was still fine this time. Then Frieren asked about the item she needed. Unexpectedly, Hinmeru still kept it, so he immediately gave it to Frieren. After that, they went to meet the other 2 companions. Now Haida had become much more serious, because he had become a priest in this town. Meanwhile, Aizen had not changed much. Then everyone set out to watch the meteor shower again. Since the place was quite far, they started early. The moments they spent together made all the members recall their old memories. It felt as if they had returned to the past. They had traveled to many places together. Even so, to Hinmeru, everything still felt bright and fresh. Of course, in those beautiful memories, everyone was always together. Thanks to Frieren, they had the chance to travel together once again. And it also became Hinmeru's final wonderful journey. Because not long after that, Hinmeru left this world. Haida firmly believed that he had been very happy. As for Frieren, she did not show any sadness at all. This made the people around her extremely curious, because they knew Frieren had once been Hinmeru's companion. However, once she left that place, she finally broke down in tears. Because Frieren belongs to an elf race that has lived for thousands of years, she could not comprehend the lifespan of humans. Even though she knew it was short, she never thought it would be this short. This made Frieren unable to hold back her emotions. After that, Haida also returned to the royal capital, and Frieren would soon leave this place as well. This time, she was determined to learn more about humans. After more than 20 years, Frieren returned to the royal capital once again. This time, she went to find Haida's current residence. However, Frieren got lost in the forest. There, she unexpectedly met a strange girl named Fern. Coincidentally, Fern knew Haida, so she brought Frieren back home. After talking for a while, Frieren learned that Fern was Heida's adopted daughter. She was an orphan from the southern lands. This surprised Frieren greatly, because Heida was not someone who usually helped others. Heida then wondered why Frieren had come here. It turned out that Frieren planned to go to the royal capital to buy some things. Then she remembered that she owed Heida a lot in the past. So she wanted to repay him before he passed away. Seeing this, Heida wanted to ask Frieren for a favor. He knew very well that Fern had the talent to become a mage. Therefore, Heida wanted Frieren to take her as a disciple. Frieren could take Fern anywhere with her. However, she immediately refused, because Fern would surely become a burden to her. Moreover, the mortality rate of mages during training is extremely high. So Frieren did not want to push a child like her into danger. At that moment, Heida had another thought after being rejected. He had a book that had been excavated from deep underground. This magic book contained extremely mysterious content. It spoke about a spell to revive the dead. And that was what Heida wanted Frieren to decipher. However, she believed such things could never exist. Frieren even became curious about his reason for wanting to decode it. It turned out that Heida had begun to fear death more than before. So he wanted to find a way to become immortal. In truth, Heida only wanted a little more time. At that moment, Heida made a small request. He wanted Frieren to teach magic to Fern while she was deciphering the book. After that, Frieren decided to find Fern in the deep forest, because she always trained in that area. Frieren was surprised that she could not detect Fern's mana, even though she was standing very close. Frieren believed it was a highly advanced control technique. At Fern's age, that was truly unbelievable. Her goal was to hit the rock on the opposite side. According to Heida, only if Fern succeeded could she be considered mature. However, her mana was always scattered, so it was very difficult for her to achieve that goal. Therefore, she did not know how to train properly. So Fern listened as Frieren explained magic in depth. Simply put, it consists of 3 core elements of a mage. The first is the amount of mana. The second is the power to use it. And the last is the ability to control it. The reason Fern's magic had been scattered earlier was because her power and mana were insufficient. And of course, this could not be improved immediately. Fern would need many years of training to develop it. So Frieren advised her to persevere until the end. From then on, Fern began to follow what Frieren had taught. Time passed like that. With Fern's effort, the results she achieved were truly not bad, even though she had only trained for 4 years. But for Frieren, others would need up to 10 years to reach Fern's current level. However, for her to mature as Heida wished, Frieren felt it was still a long way off. Suddenly, Heida unexpectedly fainted, even though they had been talking normally just before. Perhaps Heida's current health was no longer good, but he knew very well that nothing could last forever. The fact that he could still live like this was already a miracle to him. However, Frieren refused to give up. She would make use of the time to quickly decipher the book. After that, Frieren went to Fern to inform her about Heida's health condition. However, Fern was still persevering there, trying to hit the rock. Even though she tried her best, she still could not reach it. It turned out that everything Fern kept trying to do was for Heida. She wanted to repay him with something. And Fern believed that if she could grow up and live well, that alone would be a great gift for Heida. To prove that what Heida did back then, more precisely, saving her life, was completely worth it. At that moment, Frieren silently understood Fern's thoughts, so she decided to leave. After some time, when Frieren finished deciphering the book, she discovered that there was no resurrection magic written in it. Surprisingly, Heida showed no reaction at all. Perhaps he had already known this truth beforehand. It turned out that Heida's true purpose was to have Frieren teach and guide Fern. Only now did Frieren realize his real intention. After all these years, Fern was no longer a burden to Frieren. Of course, she was becoming more and more mature. At that moment, Heida officially entrusted Fern to Frieren, because he knew he would not live much longer. And Heida did not want Fern to experience sorrow. So the best choice was for her to follow Frieren. That was Heida's only wish before his death. At that moment, Frieren could no longer hold back her emotions. Finally, Fern successfully hit the rock. Her task before reaching maturity was completed. After that, Fern and Frieren went to Heida's grave. They visited him very often. The two of them now lived together. They traveled together on the same journey. Of course, Frieren continued exploring magic everywhere. But she still did not understand why it was all trivial things. For example, simple folk magic. Frieren wanted to use magic to create hot tea. Sometimes she would turn sweet grapes sour using magic. In short, they were all small, trivial things. Fern believed that Frieren must truly love magic to collect such strange spells. But to Frieren, these were just normal hobbies. After that, the two of them went to Hinmeru's statue. Unexpectedly, its condition was very poor. It turned out that the villagers no longer cared about it. So Frieren immediately used magic to restore it. Of course, Hinmeru's statue soon looked as good as before. Frieren even carefully planted the flowers he liked. They surrounded Hinmeru's statue. After that, the two continued their journey. At this time, they split up to buy supplies. But Fern already knew Frieren would buy strange things. Because Fern had already bought all the necessities, Frieren's current expression seemed to be hiding something. Fern had a feeling that moments like this never meant anything good. So she decided to carefully follow Frieren. At that moment, Frieren suddenly went to a jewelry shop, with a very confused expression on her face. This surprised Fern, because she had never seen such an expression before. After some time choosing, Frieren finally finished. Then she decided to return to the inn. However, Fern had spent the whole time following Frieren, so she had not bought anything at all. Therefore, Fern returned to the inn empty-handed. Surprisingly, Frieren showed no reaction at all. She even invited Fern to go eat sweets together. While the two were choosing their food, Frieren suddenly recalled old memories with her teammates in the triumphant hero party. Back then, Hinmeru could easily guess what she wanted to eat. This made Frieren feel a little disappointed, because everyone always understood each other. Yet Frieren herself knew nothing about them. But to Hinmeru, it was enough for Frieren to learn little by little. And at the present time, it was the same. Frieren felt guilty for not knowing anything about Fern. It turned out that today was Fern's birthday. So the piece of jewelry Frieren bought earlier was actually the gift she had prepared for Fern. This made Fern very happy, because Frieren was trying to understand her more. Since Frieren used to be a very simple person, this was a significant improvement for her. Understanding human emotions was extremely difficult for Frieren. The next morning, the two continued their new journey. At that moment, Fern became curious about the purpose of the trip. However, it was nothing special in Frieren's mind. She simply wanted to collect magic as a hobby, especially her journey to understand humans. After that, Frieren began checking Fern's magic. With everything she had diligently taught before, Fern kept learning many new things each time. This time, Frieren had a new mission. In the past, Hinmeru was always the one who did this. That was going to the seal of Kuvaru. At this moment, Frieren was led there by an old man. It turned out Kuvaru was a demon who had caused many massacres. Fortunately, Hinmeru and his companions had sealed him 80 years ago. Frieren sensed that the seal was about to break. That was why she came here today. Frieren was determined to eliminate Kuvaru once again. After that, they arrived at the location. Kuvaru was an extremely large demon. His body was many times bigger than a normal human. After checking, Frieren realized the seal was no longer stable. So the next day, she would break the seal to deal with Kuvaru. That night, the two girls stayed at a nearby inn, so they could act immediately the next morning. At this moment, Frieren began removing the seal. She reminded Fern not to let her guard down. Kuvaru had just returned to normal. He immediately wanted to take revenge on everyone, because he had been sealed for 80 years. Kuvaru unleashed Zorutaraku. It was a deadly magic spell. Zorutaraku could easily pierce through anything with terrifying destructive power. Tens of thousands had died from this attack. However, Zorutaraku in the present was just a fairly normal attack spell. Even Fern could block it. Because after Kuvaru was sealed, many mages around the world studied and analyzed Zorutaraku. And within just a few years, it became part of human magic systems. Magic resistance equipment was also developed from this. Therefore, Zorutaraku was no longer a deadly spell. However, Kuvaru quickly noticed the weakness of defensive magic, because it required a lot of mana to maintain. So Kuvaru used that to launch continuous attacks. But Fern had trained very hard beforehand, so she could defend both herself and Frieren. Meanwhile, Frieren attacked Kuvaru from behind, making it impossible for him to defend, because Frieren used Kuvaru's own magic against him. In the end, Frieren completely eliminated Kuvaru. This made the villagers feel relieved. They could now live peacefully again. A new journey awaited Frieren and Fern. This time, they arrived at a southern coastline. It was a place where ships had difficulty navigating, because many things had washed ashore. In the past, villagers used to take care of this place, but now it had long been abandoned. If Frieren and Fern could clean up this place, so that the beach could return to its original beauty, Frieren would receive a magic book, especially one that belonged to a great mage named Frieren. So Frieren immediately agreed to take on this job. However, Fern discovered that the book was fake. Surprisingly, Frieren already knew that, because there was never any real book from Frieren. It turned out Frieren accepted this job out of kindness. This was also an opportunity for her to learn more about this place. During this season, the weather was extremely cold. However, the task of cleaning the beach still had to continue. But only Fern worked diligently, while Frieren was still half asleep. Every morning, Fern was the one who woke her up. Fern even handled the remaining personal tasks, making it impossible for her to imagine what Frieren was like when she traveled with the hero party. How she actually looked back then. It turned out Frieren had always been like this. Even her teammates were not satisfied with her. After that, the two of them worked hard. Finally, the beautiful beach returned. It looked completely different from before. Then Frieren was invited by the villagers to attend the New Year festival. Unexpectedly, she immediately agreed. It turned out this was her true purpose for taking the job. She wanted to experience the New Year celebration, because in the past, Frieren had refused such invitations from her teammates many years ago. At this moment, Frieren still didn't feel much. Returning to the present, to attend the New Year festival, everyone had to be there early in the morning. Of course, Frieren also had to wake up early. But this was another challenge for her. However, after witnessing the sunrise, Frieren could not resist its beauty. Even Fern wanted to fully enjoy that moment. After 30 years, Frieren returned to meet Aizen. Aizen was surprised that she had taken on a disciple. At this moment, Frieren was curious whether Aizen needed her help with anything. However, Aizen was still in good health, so he didn't need anything. He then led everyone to the Auroru Valley, because Aizen wanted Frieren to find the journal of the great mage Frieren. This was the place Haida had previously discovered. After compiling Frienen's records, the journal was somewhere in Auroru Valley. Seeing this, Frieren began to take action. After searching for a while, Fern discovered a suspicious location. To the west, there was a giant ancient tree embracing some ruins. So everyone set out toward that place. While walking, Frieren became curious about Aizen's intention. She didn't understand why Aizen needed Frienen's journal. It turned out Aizen felt sympathy for Frieren and Hinmeru. On the day Hinmeru died, Frieren had said she wished she could understand Hinmeru more. Hearing those words, Aizen thought she should speak directly to Hinmeru. Therefore, Aizen had heard that in Frienen's journal, there was a record of her talking to the dead. So Aizen believed it would be useful for this plan. But to Frieren, this was just a fairy tale. However, Aizen remained firm in this plan. Finally, everyone arrived. The ancient tree before them was protected by a powerful barrier. Surprisingly, Frieren had been here 1,000 years ago, because she was the top disciple of the great mage Frieren. At this moment, Frieren could easily break the seal of the tree. Everyone successfully entered inside, and of course, inside it contained Frienen's journal. More surprisingly, the page was already open for Frieren. It mentioned communicating with the dead. That place was exactly in the north of the continent, a place humans in this world call heaven. Auroru was the land where souls rest. There, Frieren had once spoken with her old friends. And so, Frieren immediately came up with a new plan. That was to go to Auroru to meet her old companion Hinmeru again. After that, everyone got on the carriage to return home. While Frieren was fast asleep, Aizen curiously asked Fern whether Frieren was a good master or not. However, Fern herself could not tell. Frieren only traveled casually to collect magic, and she often pushed Fern into difficult situations. But Frieren was very interested in understanding people, especially in learning more about her old comrades from the hero party. Fern knew very well that she was accepted as Frieren's disciple, only because of a promise to Hinmeru. But Frieren was a very strange person. Sometimes she didn't care about others at all. Yet she could still give Fern a birthday gift, making Fern unable to understand what Frieren was thinking. As for Aizen, after a long journey together with her and the others, Aizen believed that Frieren was truly a good master. The next day, Frieren and Fern officially set off. The two began a new journey with Auroru as their destination. For Aizen, this would definitely be a long journey. He and his former companions had spent nearly 10 years to reach it, because this was the path the hero party once took to defeat the Demon King. As for Fern, in her dream, she followed Heida's advice, which was to listen to Frieren. Then Fern suddenly woke up, and Frieren informed her that they were about to reach a nearby village. This place was the central region of the V-Re continent. On the way, Frieren and Fern were suddenly stopped by the villagers, because everyone knew they would pass through the mountain pass, which was an extremely dangerous area. Many people had already gone missing there. The villagers rumored that people had been taken by ghosts. Hearing this, Frieren went to investigate. In the end, the two learned that some people had seen the ghosts of their deceased relatives. They could even talk to them. So Frieren thought it wasn't dangerous at all. At first, she thought there would be demons appearing. Therefore, the two continued their journey. After that, they went deeper into a forest with a stream running across it. This was exactly where many people had disappeared. So Frieren and Fern carefully observed their surroundings. As expected, there were traces of magic being used. Fern believed it was illusion magic. The monsters used it to lure humans. By creating illusions of the deceased, their purpose was simply to eat humans. But for a mage like Frieren, it was not dangerous at all. She could easily dispel it with basic magic. Fern thought the only way was to attack the illusion directly, since it was fake anyway. It turned out that Frieren had once attacked an illusion of Fernme. She even heard her master begging for mercy. However, Frieren did not feel that guilty. Even so, it still didn't feel comfortable for her. At this moment, they were getting very close to their destination. Frieren carefully instructed Fern, when the illusion appears, she must attack immediately without hesitation. Right away, an illusion of Heida appeared behind them. Unexpectedly, the monster used Fern's precious memories, causing her to hesitate instantly. But this trick was already familiar to Frieren. She destroyed the illusion without hesitation. Frieren easily overcame this challenge. After a while, as they continued toward Auroru, Frieren and Fern encountered a giant dragon. In the nest beside it was a magic book, which was exactly what Frieren was looking for. At this moment, she intended to defeat the dragon, but after Fern attacked it, there was no reaction at all. It had almost no effect. At this point, Frieren had no choice but to retreat. Fortunately, both of them managed to escape. Frieren recalled what Aizen had said before. He had a disciple named Shutaruku. Shutaruku is currently living near the Auroru Valley area. Aizen wants Frieren to recruit him into the team when they arrive. Therefore, Frieren and Fern are searching for information about that young man. As expected, Shutaruku is very well known. About 3 years ago, the dragon they saw earlier attacked the village. That was when Shutaruku appeared. He showed no hesitation when facing the giant dragon. Surprisingly, after staring at each other for a while, the fierce dragon left. Since then, the villagers have been living in peace, all thanks to Shutaruku being there. So Frieren and Fern wanted to ask him for help. That is to defeat that dragon. At that moment, they officially met each other. At first, Shutaruku didn't know the identities of the two girls. But after Frieren introduced herself, Shutaruku immediately recognized her, because they were related to his master. At that moment, Frieren spoke frankly. She wanted Shutaruku to join their team, so they could defeat the Sun Dragon together. Shutaruku quickly realized, this seemed to be Aizen's plan, to have everyone travel together. Their mission this time was to defeat the Sun Dragon. If Shutaruku were alone, he wouldn't be able to do it. But with Frieren joining, he believed it was only a matter of time. For Frieren, she only needed to hold the dragon still for 30 seconds, and she would definitely be able to defeat it. At the same time, Frieren understood that Shutaruku lacked battle experience. His previous action was just a misunderstanding. Back then, he only stood still because he didn't know what to do. Luckily, the sun dragon changed its mind and flew away. So the villagers believed Shutaruku had special power. That's why they called him a hero. Since then, Shutaruku continued to stay there. He couldn't bring himself to run away. This made Fern have a bad impression of him, because she thought Shutaruku was a coward. However, Frieren still decided to keep him. She gave Shutaruku one night to think carefully. If he agreed, he would join their journey. It turned out this was Aizen's wish from the past. Long ago, Shutaruku's hometown was attacked by demons. He ran away in fear. So Aizen devoted all his effort to training him. Now, in Aizen's eyes, Shutaruku is someone who can fight for others. That is why Frieren decided to bring him along. It seemed Shutaruku had made extraordinary efforts. Fern accidentally witnessed that proof. When Shutaruku used an axe to split a cliff in half. At first, Shutaruku didn't want to face the Sun Dragon. But he still tried hard to train. It turned out he wanted to see the villagers smile. In the past, they lived in fear of the dragon. But ever since Shutaruku appeared, they were able to live in peace. Even though Shutaruku hadn't actually done anything yet. The reason was that the dragon simply hadn't attacked again. So Shutaruku trained day and night to be able to face that dragon, even though he didn't like it at all. But to the villagers, Shutaruku is their hero, so he must protect them. The next morning, Frieren and Fern arrived, but they didn't see Shutaruku anywhere, making them disappointed, thinking he had run away. Unexpectedly, Shutaruku appeared from behind. He was now fully prepared. However, he wanted Frieren to promise him, even if he were to die during the battle, Frieren must still defeat the dragon. So she immediately agreed. After that, the three of them faced the dragon. At that moment, Shutaruku seemed very afraid. His hands were trembling uncontrollably, which made Frieren find it quite amusing, because Shutaruku was very similar to his master, who was none other than Aizen. However, Aizen believed that fear was not a bad thing, because having fear gives one the courage to fight. Returning to the present, Shutaruku was now facing the dragon alone, while Frieren and Fern were observing from afar. Their goal was to find the right moment to strike. At this moment, Shutaruku attacked the dragon with all his strength. Once he began fighting, his previous fear disappeared. Then he successfully restrained the dragon. So Shutaruku called out to Frieren to finish it. But she showed no reaction at all, which made Shutaruku frustrated. He thought he had been deceived by Frieren. However, Frieren informed him that the dragon was already dead, meaning that Shutaruku alone was capable of defeating it. After that, Frieren quickly took the magic book from the nest. It seemed that was her only interest. Just as Shutaruku had expected, Frieren's hobby after each adventure was quite silly. But surprisingly, Shutaruku found it enjoyable. After that, Shutaruku officially left the village, a place that had been part of his life for over 3 years. Now, he would travel with Frieren and Fern on a new journey, because he also wanted a silly adventure of his own. On their way to Auroru, they were stopped by guards and not allowed to pass, because they were entering a restricted area. So Frieren began thinking of a new plan. Meanwhile, she decided to stay in the city for a while. Frieren suddenly wanted to find a place to study magic, so she chose to go alone, leaving only Fern and Shutaruku together. Then Shutaruku tried to invite her out for a meal. However, Fern's intimidating expression appeared, so Shutaruku decided to go alone for safety. But when he arrived at a nearby dessert shop, Fern suddenly appeared behind him, which surprised Shutaruku greatly. After eating, the two went outside. At that moment, Shutaruku planned to climb over the city wall. However, Fern thought it was impossible, because there was a strong barrier along the border, and the wall was extremely high, so climbing over it was impossible. After that, the two went around asking for information, but the result was still the same. At this point, Shutaruku felt the situation was hopeless, so he thought it would be best to go directly to the guard station. Fern was surprised by how enthusiastic he was. She didn't expect him to be so proactive. Then he suddenly changed the topic. Shutaruku noticed how beautiful the scenery was, which reminded him of past memories. Back then, Aizen had brought him here. Aizen shared stories of exciting adventures. Even Shutaruku became excited just hearing about them. Because normally, Aizen never talked about himself. But when he spoke about that journey, he seemed like a completely different person. He clearly cherished that 10-year journey deeply. And Shutaruku knew that Aizen wanted Frieren to take him along. So Shutaruku wanted to explore the world in his master's place, and bring back many stories as a gift for Aizen. That was the only way he could repay him. If things continued like this without progress, Aizen might pass away. After that, Frieren secretly observed the guards. Unfortunately, she was discovered, but this time, the guards treated her politely. It turned out they already knew her true identity. Just then, the captain of the guards appeared. He bowed and apologized to Frieren for the actions of his subordinates earlier. At this moment, the captain of the guards announced that Frieren could freely pass through this area to head north. As a result, everyone easily passed through the gate. Of course, another challenge was approaching. As they continued their journey, they came across a road blocked by rocks and debris. It was likely caused by a landslide earlier in that area. So Frieren and Fern used magic to clear it away. Shutaruku also helped out. Then he became curious about the cause of the landslide. A villager who was stuck there explained. It turned out that many areas were still battling monsters. So the landslide might have been the result of a previous fight. After working hard to clear the path, they finally completed the task. Then they had the chance to travel with a villager from the town. Today was Liberation Day, so there were many carriages heading into the town. It turned out to be a day to commemorate the hero party, the ones who defeated the Demon King 80 years ago. At that moment, the man traveling with them didn't know that Frieren was also a member of the hero party. At this moment, she recalled past memories. Back then, Hinmeru was always interested in building statues. The reason was that he wanted people to remember them. But the biggest reason was that he didn't want Frieren to be lonely in the future. Perhaps it was because her lifespan was far longer than the others. Hinmeru wanted everything to last forever. Returning to the present, Frieren gazed at it for a long time. Perhaps she had finally understood Hinmeru's words. The next morning, while everyone was strolling through the town, Frieren suddenly raised her staff in a defensive stance, because she sensed that a demon was about to appear. It turned out to be the peace envoy Yaguna, and the one accompanying him was Hakushaku. Since Frieren attempted to attack Yaguna, the guards around her restrained her. They even decided to imprison Frieren for a period of 3 years. However, Frieren showed no reaction at all, while Fern was the opposite. She couldn't understand why her master would waste time like that. At this moment, Frieren thought it didn't matter. She was curious why a demon like Yaguna was acting as a peace envoy here. After Fern investigated, she learned about those involved in the situation. One of them was Aura the Guillotine. She was directly commanded by the Demon King. According to Frieren, after the Demon King was defeated, his subordinates disappeared without a trace. It turned out Aura regained her power 28 years ago. Since then, the city had been fighting her for many years. But she suddenly proposed peace, after countless meaningless battles by her army. That was why the people welcomed the peace envoy. But to Frieren, this was a mistake, because negotiating with demons is pointless. Demons are monsters that eat humans. They inherently possess malicious intent. At this moment, Frieren told a story from the past, about an incident involving demons. Back then, there was a demon disguised as a child. However, she had eaten another child. After that, the villagers insisted she must be killed. But some people hesitated, because they thought she was just an innocent child. So the village chief decided to take her in. At that time, Frieren had already foreseen the future. She knew something terrible would happen again. And indeed, it did. Even though the demon was cared for by the village chief, she mercilessly killed him. At that moment, Frieren could no longer tolerate it. So she immediately killed the demon. To Frieren, demons use human language, but beyond communication, it is merely a tool to deceive others. Since ancient times, the great mage Fern had defined, the monsters that can speak are precisely demons. As for Yaguna, he felt that Friren's face seemed very familiar. Yaguna sensed that she was not an ordinary person. In this city, only Frieren truly understood the nature of demons. Of course, Frieren also sensed something was wrong. Most likely, this city was about to fall. After that, Hakushaku brought Yaguna to a certain place. It was his son's room. Hakushoku's son was an exceptionally talented person. He was even preparing to inherit the family legacy. However, Hakushoku's son had died, because he had fought in a battle against Aura 10 years ago. Since then, Hakushoku had always hated people like Aura. He intended to kill all the envoys. That was Hakushoku's true purpose. When he brought Yaguna and his group here. However, Yaguna showed no reaction at all. He began speaking with deceptive words. His goal was to gain Hakushoku's sympathy, making him soften because of his words. At this moment, Yaguna only wanted to talk things out. He did not want another bloody battle. So Hakushoku immediately drew his sword and quickly left the place. As expected, Yaguna's lies were effective. He knew Hakushoku was an emotional person. So Yaguna planned to use clever words to make Hakushoku lower his guard. After that, Aura would surely send forces to destroy the city. As for Dorada, he was a companion of Yaguna and Linny. They used the disguise of peace envoys of Aura to carry out their sinister plans in the future. At this moment, Dorada believed Frieren knew too much, especially about the true nature of demons. Frieren was an obstacle that needed to be eliminated. So Dorada went to find her to assassinate her. It seemed Frieren had already anticipated their plans. So she was not surprised at all. She claimed she was far stronger than Dorada. However, he did not believe her words. Dorada thought it was just meaningless talk. At that moment, he created sharp threads, then used them to lift Frieren into the air. However, she showed no fear at all, which surprised Dorada. Of course, his power was nothing compared to Frieren. But Dorada was still very confident in his strength. Unexpectedly, Frieren used those very sharp threads, the ones Dorada had created, to cut off his arm. Before Dorada could react, he was instantly defeated by Frieren. When Frieren stepped outside, she discovered the guards had also been killed. As for Fern and Shutaruku, it seemed they were still unaware of Frieren's situation. At that moment, Fern planned to meet Hakushoku directly, to ask him to release Frieren. So Shutaruku agreed with the plan. As for Yaguna's group, when they saw that Dorada had not returned, they silently understood that he had died. Linny thought Dorada had been too careless. At that moment, Hakushoku's men arrived. He announced that Frieren had escaped from prison. Then Hakushoku became curious about Yaguna's remaining companion. However, Yaguna made up an excuse to avoid the question. But Hakushoku was now suspicious. He ordered the guards to surround Yaguna and Linny. So Yaguna decided to resolve things with violence. He single-handedly killed all the guards in an instant. And the only one left alive was Hakushoku. The two of them now stood facing each other. Although Yaguna had been exposed, it only made him more excited. After that, Yaguna used his own blood to form a sharp attack aimed at Hakushoku. However, Yaguna still did not intend to kill him, because Yaguna needed Hakushoku to remove the barrier protecting the city. As for Frieren, while she was trying to hide, since she had just escaped from prison, she accidentally ran into Fern and Shutaruku. After a while, the two finally learned about the current situation. At this moment, Frieren just wanted to leave this place. However, Fern was not willing to let the demons go. She did not want to abandon the city. But for Frieren, it was very simple. She believed Fern and Shutaruku could handle them. In fact, Frieren had great faith in their strength. Even so, Shutaruku still wanted Frieren's support. However, Fern seemed to understand her master's words. So she decided to fight alongside Shutaruku. Meanwhile, Frieren still had another task to complete. It turned out she had discovered that not far away, someone was watching the current situation. That person was none other than Aura. Of course, Frieren would be the one to deal with them, even though she always hated doing this kind of work. So she wanted to finish it quickly. In the darkness of night, Fern and Shutaruku approached Hakushoku. However, he was being held captive by Yaguna. Yaguna was currently planning to destroy the city. Of course, he still needed Hakushoku, so that he could remove the protective barrier. Unexpectedly, the great mage Frieren was the one who created that barrier. And Hakushoku had been entrusted to maintain it through generations. Now Yaguna planned to destroy it. If Hakushoku refused to cooperate, he would be subjected to brutal torture. After that, Yaguna's group left. Not long after, Shutaruku appeared. He came to rescue Hakushoku. However, Shutaruku could not cut the ropes binding him. It was likely that Yaguna's magic was involved. At this moment, Hakushiku no longer wished to live. For him, the people were what mattered most. Around his neck was the family crest. As long as the guards saw it, they would obey, so Shutaruku prepared to take action. Unfortunately, Yaguna's group discovered him. However, Yaguna easily spared Shutaruku and advised him to leave. At that moment, Shutaruku suddenly attacked Yaguna. Although he was fast, he was still human, so he could not defeat Yaguna. Shutaruku carelessly allowed himself to be restrained. But things did not end there. It turned out this was part of Frieren and Shutaruku's plan. Right after that, Frieren seized the moment when Yaguna was distracted. She successfully used magic to pierce through Yaguna's body, causing him to collapse immediately. After that, Frieren intended to deal with Linny as well. However, Hakushiku's condition was more urgent, so they retreated to save him. As for Yaguna, he did not rush to chase them, because his blood had stained Frieren and Shutaruku, so he could easily track them afterward. Feren's power reminded him of someone from the past, someone who had destroyed thousands of demons. Of course, that person was none other than Frieren. At this moment, Yaguna connected all the pieces. Frieren was the one he hated the most. As for Hakushiku, he was temporarily saved. After that, he thanked Frieren and Shutaruku for saving him. As for Frieren, Hakushiku felt deeply apologetic after he learned who she truly was, because he and his family owed a great debt to the hero party. 80 years ago, this city was at war. It was the battle between the hero party and the Demon King. Aura the Guillotine was also part of that battle. After 80 years, the two met again. At this moment, Aura held the advantage, so she would not easily give up this city. Thus, the two faced each other once more. Frieren was determined to take Aura's life, so that no one else would be killed by Aura again. As for Hakushiku, he clearly understood that Aura possessed the scales of obedience. So for generations, no one had been able to defeat her. True to its name, the scales of obedience, it is a type of magic that forces the opponent to submit. Aura places both her soul and her opponent's soul onto the scale. Then she compares the mana of both sides. Whoever has greater mana can control the other, turning them into a puppet permanently. Until their body decays, only someone with greater mana than Aura would have a chance to defeat her. But ever since Aura became one of the 7 sages of destruction 500 years ago, no one has ever defeated her. As for Shutaruku, after recovering from his injuries, he intended to go face Yaguna. However, Frieren was still hesitant. Their previous successful attack was due to surprise. Since they couldn't find another opening, they had chosen to retreat. If Frieren and Shutaruku fought head-on, she feared they would be the ones killed. But Shutaruku remained determined, because someone had to face Yaguna eventually. So he decided to act. Seeing this, Frieren had no choice but to follow him. Shutaruku gave Frieren Hakushiku's family crest. With it, the guards would obey her. Suddenly, Shutaruku noticed blood on Feren's clothes, so she quickly threw it away, because Frieren realized the blood contained mana. And indeed, that was true. Yaguna and his group appeared immediately afterward. At that moment, Frieren was restrained by him, but he quickly released her. In that instant, Frieren understood the situation. Yaguna was simply arrogant and prideful. His sudden attack on her was just revenge. At that moment, Frieren launched a sudden attack. She used magic to pierce his heart. Unexpectedly, Yaguna reacted quickly on instinct and managed to break her attack. Meanwhile, Shutaruku was facing difficulties because Linny's strength far surpassed his, so he struggled greatly in battle. In contrast, Frieren, with her magical power, quickly pushed Yaguna back with her speed. Especially her control was extremely impressive. Even though her power was weaker than Yaguna's, her performance at this moment shocked him. He couldn't even understand how Frieren had trained her. At this point, Yaguna tried to prolong the fight, waiting for Frieren to run out of mana. However, things were not going well for him. He probably couldn't hold out much longer. Yaguna was now searching for any opening. Meanwhile, Shutaruku continued to defend, even though he was constantly attacked by Linny. Eventually, Shutaruku was knocked down. It seemed he couldn't endure many more hits. However, at that moment, he remembered his master's teachings. No matter how battered he became, Aizen would never allow him to fall. He had taught Shutaruku how to defeat stronger opponents, which was to keep standing up, and to exchange blows with them. So Shutaruku stood up again to continue fighting. He truly followed his master's teachings. With his determination, he surpassed himself and won the battle. At that moment, Linny was completely defeated by Shutaruku. As for Yaguna, he was not doing any better. He was finally pierced by Feren's Zoltrak, a spell specifically used to kill demons. As expected, Yaguna was overwhelmed by Feren's speed. At the same time, he was curious how Frieren could maintain that fighting style, especially how she never ran out of mana. It turned out Yaguna had been extremely arrogant. He was confident in the power he had trained for years. However, he paid little attention to his opponent, and that opponent was none other than Frieren. Despite her ordinary appearance, along with her impressive mana control, Frieren successfully made Yaguna underestimate her. He didn't seem to take her strength seriously at all. But now, the result was clear. Yaguna was officially defeated by Frieren. Returning to the battle between Frieren and Auroru, their situation now was similar to Frieren and Yaguna's fight earlier. Going back thousands of years ago, that was when Frieren first met Frieren. At that time, the Demon King had destroyed an entire village, and only one person survived. That person was Frieren. Her mana was so immense that even Frieren was surprised. But Frieren's condition at that time was not good. Frieren understood it was because she chose to fight head-on, even though there were many other options, such as retreating or hiding, then launching a surprise attack later. But she made a foolish decision, which nearly cost her life. Frieren believed she was actually a powerful mage, but didn't understand why she made such a choice. At that moment, Frieren questioned Frieren in return. She should have already known the reason. Because Frieren could see through Frieren. She was even stronger than Frieren. Even though Frieren had very little visible mana, that was only because of her control. Frieren was extremely impressed with Frieren, and that was why she decided to take her as a disciple. Suddenly, 3 monsters appeared. It turned out they came to kill Frieren, while Frieren could have simply left, because they didn't consider her a threat, partly because she completely suppressed her mana, so no one believed she had real power. That made the monsters overconfident and careless because of their arrogance. Due to that foolish arrogance and carelessness, when Frieren revealed her true power, they were completely wiped out without a trace. And Frien's first lesson to Frieren was to suppress mana. They needed to hide their strength by limiting their mana output, so that their enemies would become careless due to arrogance. Maintaining this suppression required a lifetime of discipline. Frieren herself never allowed any lapse in this. That was her discipline, to deceive demons and monsters. Returning to the present battle, Auroru brought out the scales of obedience. She placed both their souls onto the scale. Whoever had less mana would submit to the other. Auroru believed she had maintained immense mana ever since 500 years ago, so she thought no one could rival her. But her opponent this time was Frieren. Going back 1,000 years ago, Frieren wondered why demons and monsters did not suppress their mana. It turned out there was a reason for that. According to Frieren, monsters were incapable of doing so. In their society, hierarchy was everything. They needed someone superior to lead them. For them, mana was like social status among humans, so none of them would ever suppress it. They always wanted to display their power. The stronger the demon, the more they showed off their mana. Fortunately, Frieren was able to control it perfectly, just as Frieren had originally intended. She truly did not misjudge this disciple. Frieren was even glad to have entrusted magic to Frieren. And with Frieren's long lifespan, Frieren was certain she would become incredibly powerful. However, Frieren had one small request. She asked Frieren to use magic to create a field of flowers around her grave. Frieren truly loved that spell, simply because her parents had taught it to her when she was young. At the same time, Frieren reminded Frieren not to think about leaving a mark in history, and to live without standing out too much. The moment Frieren should go down in history would only be when she defeats the Demon King. From that moment on, Frieren always remembered those words. She continued to train diligently, and eventually, she met the members of the Hero Party. From then on, the Hero Party was officially formed. Returning to the present battle, Auroru began comparing their mana. She only relied on the mana she could sense from Frieren, which made her careless. She thought Frieren had trained for only about 100 years. But the truth would soon surprise her. At that moment, Aura drew her sword and charged at Frieren, because her mana seemed slightly greater than Frieren's. But gradually, the truth was revealed. The scale began to tilt toward Frieren. It was time for Frieren to reveal her true power. Aura had completely misjudged her mana, because Frieren had been suppressing it. That was how she was able to defeat Aura. The one standing before Aura now was Frieren, a mage who had lived for over 1,000 years. In the end, Aura was completely defeated by the very power of the scales of obedience she created, which now forced her to take her own life. When everyone arrived at Frieren's location, everything had already been resolved. It was truly a fierce battle. Even Hikushiku could hardly believe it. However, he was deeply grateful. Frieren had saved the city in its time of crisis. After that, Frieren and her 2 disciples were welcomed by the townspeople. Everyone was thankful for their bravery. And so, this mission came to an end. Of course, Frieren's group still had a new journey ahead. Their destination was Auroru in the north of the continent. However, with the harsh weather, it was not easy for Fern and Shutaruku. Fortunately, when they reached the foot of the mountain, Frieren remembered there was a house to take shelter. Even though she had not returned for 80 years, the house was still intact. Surprisingly, there was someone else inside. He was a monk named Kuvaru. Because of the harsh weather, he had also decided to stay there. After that, everyone rested to escape the cold. The next morning, when Shutaruku woke up, he was surprised to find a stranger lying beside him. But after Kuvaru explained, Shutaruku gradually understood the situation. At that moment, Kuvaru asked Fern and Frieren to help transport supplies. His cart was nearby, but because of the cold, he hadn't brought it back. Thanks to Fern and Frieren, everyone now had enough food for many days. After that, they happily lived together through the winter. Fortunately, they all remained safe despite the harsh weather. Then Kuvaru eventually left, beginning his own new journey. Of course, if given the chance, he would love to meet them again. After that, they continued heading north. Suddenly, they came across a village deep in the mountains. There, Frieren was welcomed by a young village chief. This place was known as the Village of Swordsmen. This is the place where the hero's sword, granted by the goddess, is embedded. Throughout history, many heroes have tried to pull it out, but no one has succeeded, except for one person, Hinmeru. According to legend, the one who can draw the sword will be the hero who drives away the calamity that destroys the world. Although many years have passed, this village is still filled with many forest lords, causing great hardship for the villagers. So the next morning, Frieren's group took action. They easily defeated the forest lords with magic. But that was only a small group. At that moment, Shutaruku discovered another pack of forest lords. So he immediately attacked. This time, the strongest among them appeared. It was extremely aggressive toward the strangers. Fortunately, Fern successfully created a barrier to protect Frieren. And with Frieren's power alone, their mission was completed. And that place was also where the hero's sword stood. At that moment, Frieren looked back on her memories there. They were truly unforgettable memories, especially those with her former companions. After completing their mission, they naturally continued their journey. After passing the village of swordsmen, they arrived at a nearby city. Then Frieren rested in an inn, while Shutaruku was still full of energy. So he went around exploring the city. Later, he stopped to watch the sunset. Coincidentally, Fern also appeared there, so she invited Shutaruku to take a walk together. It turned out that today was Shutaruku's birthday. So Fern wondered what he would like, so she could give him a birthday gift. This surprised Shutaruku greatly, because he had never received a gift before. He didn't even know much about such things, since he had lost his parents at a young age. His hometown was a village of warriors, where there was no place for the weak. Because of his limited ability, even though he trained hard, Shutaruku still couldn't fight monsters, so he was looked down upon by the villagers. And when demons attacked his hometown, he ran away in fear, which made him feel deep regret. However, Fern didn't care about his past, because the Shutaruku of today was different. She had never seen him run away. Now, Shutaruku was no longer alone. He had companions by his side. After that, Fern took him to buy a gift. And then they returned home to have dinner with Frieren. Everyone shared a wonderful time together. Even though their journey had not been easy. As long as they kept moving forward, life would surely become brighter. And of course, more challenges awaited ahead. How will Frieren and her two disciples overcome them? As they continue to fight for peace. Let's look forward to the next episodes together. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in future videos. Thank you for watching. Much love.